Do you
like
think
some
that
kind
stuff
of
is
borate.
toxic? I mean, like,
It
what
can't
is
be
that?
good for you.
What is that
Exactly.
stuff?
Well,
you
if
gotta-
it's just got borates embedded in it, it's not going to be.
Borates, yeah. I mean, you don't want to be snorting borate, but it's
Speak for yourself, man. Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, a weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Fine Homebuilding Senior Editor Mark Peterson.
Hello.
FineHomebuilding.com Editor Rob Watzak.
Hey there.
And producer, editor, sound engineer, and snappy dresser Jeff Rose.
Hi there.
Please email your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Well, good morning, gents. Thanks for being on the show.
Good morning. It's good to see you, Patrick.
What have you guys been doing? Mark, what have you been doing? You making any headway on that house?
Slowly but surely. Yeah, last weekend and last week a little bit, I was insulating the main house foundation, just the exterior. There needs more insulation, but running the 2-inch foam 2 feet down on the interior before kind of backfilling it with some stone. So that's what I've been doing.
So do you have to dig that back out by hand? Is that all washed back in?
It was empty already, so I didn't have to do any digging.
That's cool.
I'm going to do the same thing underneath the mother-in-law suite, and that I will have to do a little bit of digging, which I'm not looking forward to.
So am I correct in guessing from the photo? First of all, I want to say nice work on the tidy foam and gravel installation.
It's very tidy.
But am I looking at a stem wall that's going to be sticking up above a slab? Is that the detail there?
It is, yeah. Actually, in this case, yes, that's exactly right. Correct.
What's your frost depth in Kentucky?
I think they say 18 inches, I think, something like that.
That'd be nice.
Yeah.
What was it in Minnesota? Was it 4 feet in Minnesota?
Your frost footings had to be 4 feet down, but I've seen it go deeper. And it's crazy how well the snow is an insulator. Because I was watching, we work for a big builder, so there's always a house being built next to us. And there was one house had about 2 feet of snow on it, and a lot. And the one snowmobile drove across it and packed that snow down. And I watched that excavator excavate that thing, and just where that snowmobile drove over, it was 3 feet deeper. It was like 2.5, 3 feet deeper than the rest of it. So it's just amazing how fresh snow is just a really, really good insulator.
Interesting. What about you, Rob? You shared some photos of your very stylish-looking whole house water filter.
Oh, yeah. Well, actually, I've got a particulate filter, which is just a pretty basic, PVC little canister that you screw one of those paper filters into. And, for all that stuff, and I also put in a GE water softener, which I bought like 10 years ago, and my wife has been begging me to put in for years. And I kept telling her, it's like there's like all these things that have to sort of fall into place in order to do it. And then it literally took me, I was taking my time, but it took me like 4 or 5 nights to run all the plumbing. And all I was doing was building like a 3-valve bypass.
Yeah, you made like a manifold and had it all ready to go in so you could turn off the water for a minimum amount of time, I'm sure.
Yeah. So I got everything piped in. Basically, I did sort of a U-shaped manifold with 3 valves, so you could either completely bypass the new water softener and filter or run right through it. And then I just had to run 2 legs off of that with elbows and split the 3/4-inch water line coming into the house and quickly connect them in. And as I suspected, like the last copper fitting I sweated, which had a tiny bit of moisture in it because it was the pipe, the old water pipe, was like the messiest and most worrisome.
I thought you didn't have all the water out of there, it seemed like.
Yeah, most worrisome fitting. But no, everything's watertight and working well. And
when I've had that situation, I've hooked up my compressor and just like blown air into pipes until it stops flowing back to you, because sometimes the heat is drawing the water, right?
For sure, yeah.
Even looking at a picture of what you did, and Rob, I had that exact same whole house filter at my last house, and I just love that thing. It works so, because I had well water, and it was just the water was terrible.
What's there
So
to
that
love
thing was
about a
like
whole house water filter, Mark?
Oh man, it's the little things in life, Patrick.
Well, I actually emptied one similar to that at my mother-in-law's house, and they've got a lot of red clay and iron, and I emptied that thing, and it was bright orange and packed full, and like it'd probably been years since somebody had opened it up, and I was surprised there was any water running through it.
And that's the thing I liked about it, because it wasn't one of those extra maintenance things where it's like, oh, I got to remember to do this every 3 months. When the water pressure starts dropping a little bit, it needs to be replaced. It kind of tells you when it's ready.
So you took this...
like it's a nice safety valve. A friend of mine had a workshop where they opened up a water main to make some connection nearby, and immediately the water just shut off to his building because so much dirt had gotten into the system. But it it saved the rest of the plumbing in the building. So.
Yeah, and they say that on even your washing machines, but like water softeners and washing machines, for whatever reason, they say those filters really make them last quite a bit longer.
I believe it. So my water is softer now. My wife and daughter are both saying I need to turn it down or something because it's
they can't rinse their hair.
They can't rinse their hair.
What was the deal? So you decided while you had the pipes all shut off to put in that heat pump water heater? Is that right?
Well, the plumbing just past where I connected everything is what used to go to a coil and the boiler, and then double back and go to the electric tank water heater that I've got, which is like 15 years old, probably ready to go any day now. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to redo all of that plumbing just downstream from the water softener next, and I might as well get a new water heater while I'm at it. And I'm gonna, I had the cash. It was a little pricier than a typical electric water heater, obviously, but we had a $750 instant rebate for the 50-gallon size in Connecticut. That's subsidized.
You mean that right at the checkout? That is
right
rung
at
up?
the checkout. Yeah,
wow,
yeah.
that's
I thought
cool.
You needed to get that rebate either by mail-in or through an installer, but no, there was a QR code on the box, and they texted me the coupon right there on the spot.
That is fantastically cool. So my guess is this thing was probably $1,100 or $1,200. So what did it end up costing you?
It was actually like 14 and change new. So it cost me, I basically saved half price on it. So, I haven't touched it yet. I just opened up the box and started learning about all the connections that I got to do. I realized because of the location of the condensate line on it, I got to put it in a different place to get it close to that new drain that I put in for the water softener. But I'm excited to see how it works. I mean, theoretically, this thing could save me a bunch of money and also potentially help dehumidify the basement. If it doesn't do an amazing job at it, it still only costs a few $100s more after the rebate than a regular electric one. And we'll see.
Jeff, how's your deck coming?
Slowly, but it's coming along. This past weekend was a lot of squatting and putting the caps on the joists and move all the boards, do the next one, move all the boards, do the next one.
I bet that takes a surprisingly long time.
It does, and just having to work from above is just
slow.
A pain.
Yeah, your deck is high up too.
Yeah, it's like 10, 12 feet off the ground. So.
Yeah.
How are you feeling after that?
Legs are a little tired.
I spent a couple hours on Sunday visiting Mason Lord's new Zoom Unity home, Ted Benson's Modular home company. And you had seen this house, Rob, but it was the first time I was there. And when you saw it, it was just set, but now it's almost ready for move-in. And God, it's a cool place. It's really good looking and thoughtfully designed. And, as Mason said, the sunshade on the south elevation, I guess it is the home's coolest feature. It's this like brushed aluminum shade for cutting off some of the high angle sun of the summertime. It's a pretty neat building.
Cool.
What did you guys think of this? I put a link in the notes here. Did you happen to go look at this house, Mark?
I did not have, nope.
Are you familiar with the Unity Homes thing?
I'm not.
So Ted Benson makes these high performance homes in a factory, and I think you can get them shipped just about anywhere. But there's several models, and they all have kind of a modern aesthetic, and they're one of the coolest features. They have a super insulated like exterior wall, and then an interior service cavity in a 2x3 stud wall. So all the pipes and mechanicals are easy to change should the building need modifications down the line, and it also keeps the envelope pretty tight. So it's a neat building.
When I moved down here, I looked into manufactured. Well, they're not called. What are we calling them? Just not manufactured, but
modulars.
Modular, yeah, modular. So, what do you think? What do you think the main advantage to a modular home is?
I think one of the things is there's a couple of things. Like if you're on a tough site, I think getting the building installed quickly and easily without, if you've got, not great working conditions is one thing. I think building walls in and roughing everything in a controlled environment, can be a good thing, especially keeping the moisture out and having a little bit. I mean, personally, after working in a cabinet shop for years and working on job sites for years, I wouldn't mind building a house in a big barn instead of building it out in the weather. But
I think it definitely goes faster, Mark.
Yeah. So speed. I mean, price wise, are you saving any money really doing that? From what I could tell, it was not.
Mason and I talked about that briefly, and we both agreed it's no bargain, but it's not any more expensive than a custom home build.
But one thing to point out is the type of house that he bought is not like your typical modular home company. I mean, if you're familiar with Ted Benson, Mark, he started with timber framing, and just timber framing naturally progressed into sort of building houses efficiently. And he kind of has always incorporated traditional, long-lasting construction methods with modern technology to build houses that are not only better designed as the way they're laid out for the way people use them and the way they're built, but also that have their layers, they call it decoupled, basically, so that you can modify interior walls, you can modify mechanical systems without destroying the house. I mean, that's the one thing about remodeling that makes it so expensive, is how much you have to sort of deconstruct the original house and dig into the layers that are all intertwined. And I think that's one of the big benefits of these unity homes.
That's his hook. Modular homes are built many different ways, and I don't think that, in fact, I'm sure they are not all built that way with service cavities. Sure. But I think in other instances, the speed of construction, the quality control, as Rob suggested, and the fact that it's not getting snowed on and rained on, right? Can you imagine, like, you've probably done it, framed a house in, Minnesota in the wintertime? It's probably kind of agonizing.
Yeah. Everything is agonizing in Minnesota in the wintertime. Maybe skiing, maybe, or snowmobiling, something like that.
Yeah.
So Carol said to me also on Saturday, she came into the barn. She was carrying the cordless grinder she's been using for her stonework for going on 2 years, I guess now. She said to me, she's like, where does this go? I'm done with the patio. And I was like, we've never stored the grinder. It doesn't have a spot. Let me find a place to put it. And so I was very impressed. I was like, so really, you're done? I'm kind of surprised. And she's, yep, I'm done. It's done. So like 6 hours later, she's like, oh boy, there's this little piece that we need to cut off. Because I was like, yeah, so we'll see.
So the images, I think I saw images of that, Patrick. Is that the kind of the stone? What kind of stone is that? Is that like a flagstone, or?
It's a flagstone. I don't know where it comes from, honestly, but it's sandstone, some kind of sedimentary rock, and yeah, they're pretty big.
Your wife did that all by herself?
Yes.
That's a huge. It looks gorgeous, by the way.
Oh, thanks. I'll tell her.
Yeah, absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, it is beautiful. She did an amazing job.
But it looks like it looks like a pretty big project.
Oh, it's nuts, Mark. I would never attempt it.
It just kept growing and growing as time went on, too, right?
I don't know if you've observed this, Mark, and listeners should forgive me. I've said this before, but there are some people who really get into stone masonry, and they just never seem to stop doing it, right?
Yeah, I don't know anybody like that.
So we heard from Carson from Oregon. In response to Patrick's question about what to do with chips and sawdust, in Japan they make a sawdust stove I have yet to see one in the U.S., and burning sawdust, to my knowledge, is dangerous. But how great would it be to get rid of all that sawdust and heat my shop in the winter? Did you guys see this little rig from? That was incredible, right?
It was cool. It wasn't just a matter of throwing it in the stove, though. There was a little prep time involved in that.
And what I love about it is, like with a lot of Japanese handcraft I've seen, is that there is the perfect tool for every part of this process of making this sawdust fire in what looks like, I don't know, a small steel trash can, right, Jeff? Did you see this?
No, I haven't seen that. No.
I like the paddle that he used to push it down with. I mean, it's like, that thing was made exactly for that purpose. It was just cool. It was a neat thing. My only caveat for that is you got to be, I mean, if you're doing furniture, it's not a problem. But if you're doing a variety of things, just got to watch out for burning green treated. You don't want to be doing that.
That's true. Or like some exotic hardwood, right? It's also toxic to burn.
I actually found a nice little blog post on this guy from Belgium who's a furniture maker, and he balked at the cost of an electric heating system in his workshop and bought one of these things from the Netherlands, I think. It's a cute little, it looks like a tiny little 30-gallon barrel, maybe even smaller than that. And it's
it looked like
layers.
15 to me. Yeah.
And but yeah, he bought this Dutch one, and he's talking about how the process of filling, takes a couple of buckets of sawdust to start it, and his oak works best, and he seemed pretty happy with it. But
we'll put Carson's video. It's not Carson's video, but the one he shared with us up on the podcast page. It's worth checking out if you're looking for something to do with your sawdust and waste chips from your wood machining processes. This comes from John. I'm a retired machinist and decided to build an 1,120 square foot house. I had help pouring the foundation, setting the trusses, spraying the insulation, and installing the mini split. But other than that, I did all the rest of the construction myself, including plumbing and electrical. I spent about 40 hours and about $500 sealing the envelope and got a 1.07 at 50 air changes per hour, at 50 pascals air changes per hour. That is so wrong. That is just I'm sorry, I should have edited this. At 1.07 air changes per hour at 50 pascals. So for all the DIY people out there, you can do just about anything with a little patience and determination. Also, helpful building inspectors are invaluable. Listen to your show all the time. Have a nice podcast. John. That's really nice, John. Good for you. I'd love to see the house. John, send us some pictures. I think building inspectors are undervalued as a resource for questions. I bet you guys would agree that most of the ones I've met are trying to be helpful and, want good housing.
Sure, and
I wholeheartedly agree. Yep.
It probably doesn't hurt if you reach out to them and show that you value their opinion when it comes time to come for the inspection either.
Oh, absolutely.
Agreed.
Yeah. I've never, and it's funny because I've heard other builders or subcontractors complain about this inspector is worse than the other one, or this one's terrible. It's like, I've never had a really vindictive or other than helpful inspector. And I've met hundreds of them, dozens of them at the least.
Yeah. I can only remember one who was not a bad guy, but just a real hard case. And he,
well, it certainly,
he didn't believe I knew what the hell I was doing, which for probably good reason.
Well, that kind of goes out to what I was about to say, is that if it's apparent that you were doing your due diligence and trying to do the right thing, I think that goes a long way. And some people maybe just don't know what the heck they're doing, or some people are trying to skirt the system, and that's probably when you're most likely going to get a tough time from an inspector.
This comes from Isaac. Isaac from St. Paul, Minnesota, checking in here. Thanks for all you do to spread knowledge about craft, carpentry, and air sealing. It's been an incredible resource over the years. I'm ready to respond to your discussion in episode 390 about feelings of inadequacy in the general undervaluation of trade work in our culture. Speaking from my own experience and curiosity about this question at a broader level, I've spent the past 5 years working at our local Habitat for Humanity affiliate as a supervisor, and consider myself lucky to have found a career with a sense of dignity and purpose that lets me be creative, analytical, and excited to show up to work every day. I didn't have a trades background before finding this work, and while I don't recall thinking of trade work as inadequate, I don't think it was ever presented as an option to me. It's been a blessing to develop my skills and a privilege to do it in the service of others through working in affordable housing. I think there are many people in my generation as a millennial that feel similarly and are motivated to work in the trades based on interest in sustainability and environmentalism, solving structural social inequalities and other areas. My experience has been that this is a conservative, slow-moving industry and that pressures around short-term profit and efficiencies are at odds with developing long-term investments by people with passion and interest for the work. My question to you, all of you, do you think the building trade industry is equipped to accept an increasingly diverse labor force motivated by interests outside of its traditional return? Can or should the industry be more welcoming to people who don't fit the traditional profile of tradespeople? I hear a lot of sloganeering around keep craft alive and you can make great money in the trades, but I'm not convinced that there's a real commitment to the people performing the work behind those phrases. Would love to know your thoughts. Sorry for the long message. Again, many thanks for your lively and informative discussions. Best, Isaac. Well, thanks for that great email, Isaac. Who wants to talk about that?
And I don't know that I can really speak to it from firsthand experience, but what I'm seeing around me over the past, decades that I've been somehow connected to the industry is that, even just the changes from when we launched Green Building Advisor back in the late 2000s to now is a lot of things that were a small group of very, niche groups of people were focusing on seem to be growing and growing as more younger people are moving in, more people with different perspectives are moving into our world. And I think it's just a gradual evolution. It's nothing's going to change overnight, but I've seen lots of great stuff happening.
That's encouraging, Ron. How about you, Mark?
I would say as far as it's tough with houses because it's still a market, it's still supply and demand. And when we were built before the big builders kind of took over everything, the nationwide builders, you would be in a plot of land with 3 or 4 or 5 other builders and you're trying to compete against them. And if your house costs $500 more than the house next to you, it's just a tough sell to say, hey, this house has better R value, or this house has more efficient windows. Or honestly, people are, not for whatever reason, it's a big purchase. So a lot of these people are kind of maxing out, getting the most house they can possibly get for their money. And there's just not a lot of wiggle room to do a lot of these upgrades.
And I think you'd agree that the buying population is poorly educated on what makes a good house.
Yes, and it's strange now, but it's a different. The big builders. I shopped around for my son for a house, and we stopped at a couple of big builders, nationwide builders, and it's from these high-end houses that practice all these new, great, super efficient, environmentally friendly practices. Some of that does trickle down. It takes a while, but it does eventually trickle down. Where you see, even in nationwide builders' houses, things that we kind of take for granted now, but 10 years ago they weren't doing it. There's certain sealing techniques and certain insulating techniques that just kind of trickle down. It does take a while, but a lot of it's just because from what people can afford and what they value, really. And part of it's our energy is so cheap, and I'm not saying it should be more expensive, but some of these things, the payback takes a long time, and people would rather just have cheap now than save money over the next 15 years. So, but I think it's moving in the right direction for sure, but it's a slow movement for sure.
What do you think about Isaac's email, Jeff?
Yeah, I think there is definitely some change in the works, but it is a slow process.
I can't think of a more entrenched industry than home building, honestly.
Yeah.
And for good reason. Builders have a lot of liability, so they're not going to get too creative with their methods, right?
I asked a big time, a nationwide builder. Well, it was a big builder. He might have been local, but I said, so I was talking to him about this project when I was a planning commissioner in my city, and I was talking to him. They had a groundbreaking. It was a big senior center that he'd built, and I asked him, so did you try anything new or innovative on this? He goes, are you kidding me? I never do that. I wait for it. I wait for other people to make the mistakes and then, learn from them. I'm like, okay.
So we heard from B. You may remember B wrote to us in episode, I forget, anyway, about her new home build in Houston. And she has another question. So I appreciate your thoughts on the matter for our house build. Unfortunately, since my question submission, we've decided on 2x4 studs, 16 on center, with some sort of exterior rigid insulation. And it has been laid out in the engineering plan already. I failed to mention that my original question that we're using zip system for the sheathing and our continuous air barrier. And this is going to be a 1-story all brick house. We've been considering all of these setups. Okay. B seems like a scientific mind here. A, zip sheathing with exterior rigid foam insulation, either XPS or EPS. The question is how to get the details right as to achieve the great benefits of adding an exterior layer despite being only in climate zone 2. Any great product if installed wrong would still end up being a bad idea. Or zip sheathing with rock wool. Since you mentioned this might not be the best product for our climate, I'm inclined to agree with you and disregard this even with its mold resistance, fire resistance, and water resistance. Plus, this product sounds expensive and the lead time I heard was about 200 days. What about zip bar sheathing? R3 instead of regular zip 7/16 sheathing and call it good. This approach would be the simplest from our subcontractor's perspective, as it wouldn't be any different from installing a regular zip sheathing they are used to. D, regular zip sheathing with 2x4 wall studs and a full open spray foam cavity insulation. Open cell. Our builder standard wall setup is 2x6, 16 on center with studs filled with open cell spray foam. It would be awesome if you could help steer us in the right direction, like what you would choose if this was your own house project. Unfortunately, talking to some of our framers and other trades, it seems like the standard practice is not geared toward good air sealing and continuous air barriers. My builder says that the HVAC system will take care of the minimal air leaks that will get through the walls, so there's not a lot of help there. I'm hesitant to enforce a setup that the subs would not install right, even if they agree to it, because they are just not up to the details needed to pull it off. We do have the last say, so I'm trying my best to do my homework and hopefully get a good outcome and as close to being a pretty good home as we can get for our budget, B. Okay, so I think we should go around the horn here and vote for our favorite wall assembly for B's Houston house. Go ahead, Mark.
Oh, me first? I would probably do so, but you know what? I actually have more questions than answers. So zip sheathing, is it kind of redundant to put up a zip sheathing and then put foam over the top of that? Are you kind of losing the advantage of the zip? I mean, is it even necessary to have zip sheathing if you're going to put some rigid foam over the top?
Well, so you can have your weather-resistive barrier layer at the zip sheathing or on the foam. So I think folks who are putting up zip system and foam on top of it would have their WRB as the zip system and the foam as just the insulation layer. It's not meant to be watertight, right?
I'm always a fan of, and it doesn't have to be 2 inches, even a ½ inch, just for a thermal break against the studs, where you can't insulate behind the studs, obviously, from the inside. So that's what
but
I'm considering.
You're not doing that on your own house.
Well, if I was in Minnesota, it wouldn't even be a question. I absolutely, positively would do it.
But because you're in this more mild climate, you're disinclined to do it.
I still may do it, but I'm debating. But yeah, I would probably be my vote. On B, she talked about the rock wool. Was she talking about like that comfort board, that exterior rock wool stuff?
Yeah,
that's what I'm guessing.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want that under the brick cladding, though.
No, especially in a hot, humid place like Houston. I think that's a bad idea because all of a sudden the sheathing, I think, is going to be a condensing surface.
Yeah, I mean, if I can jump in now, Patrick, I don't know. My first go-to would have been the foam, just because, if you were going to do zip, even though they approve it for having brick cladding over it, I still would want some extra protection, I think, between an OSB sheathing and a brick cladding.
Well, you have a brick airspace, I mean, an airspace behind the brick. There's this, that's stopping vapor drive largely, right?
Sure. But I don't know. This is Houston's a little bit out of my comfort zone as far as building assemblies go. So,
Jeff, you have thoughts?
Totally uneducated. I'm leaning towards the Zip R.
Me too. I was like, let the contractor do something easy that they're familiar with. I would say don't get very creative if they're uncomfortable with it, because you're going to end up having to be the enforcer of the good practice. And I don't know that any homeowner wants that adversarial relationship with their builder. It doesn't seem healthy to me.
Yeah, if they're going to do that, if they're going to go that route, though, you just need to make sure that you do they get all the details right for sealing and flashing that sheathing, and potentially even have another layer of protection, whether it's like one of those drainage mats or something like that, so that you have a good air gap behind the grit cladding.
And then they have to roll the tape. And I've heard of some builders who are resistant to do that. And what they say is, well, I can't peel it off. If I try to, why do I need to roll it? But the adhesives are really meant to be rolled to do their best job. And
the surfaces needs to be clean too. And I've seen some issues where, they get rain and the dirt splashed up on the bottom 2 feet and they're just putting tape over it and it's just falling right off.
Oh, that makes me so sad to hear that, Mark. A little part of me just died.
It also makes me a little uncomfortable to have a builder who just says, the HVAC system will pick up the slack.
Exactly.
Yeah, but what are you going to do? You're not going to find any other kind of builder in most places.
I know. So that's why, like you said, you want to go with this simplest system for a traditional builder to install, and just be there to check the most important details are getting done correctly.
I got to say, the worst brick failures I've seen, with regard to failures with brick, have been when there is a plastic house wrap used and there is not an airspace between the back of the masonry and the WRB, and that mortar gets in contact with a plastic house wrap and absolutely destroys it. And then solar vapor drive is when the wall heats up, forcing that water vapor into your sheathing and into your house. And in some cases, it condenses on the backside of the, poly vapor barrier, because your house is air conditioned and that's the coldest surface. And oh boy, those homes are just such a mess. Oh my gosh, I've just never seen such composty wall assemblies. It's terrible.
Yeah, I would say contact Huber or go to their website, because they have detailed drawings for how to get things done in every situation, including showing brick cladding over zip. So, if you can get some documentation to give to the builder with pictures of exactly how to do all the details right, that could be really helpful.
There's a really interesting product that's I know of. It's called Mortar Net, and it's a matrix, a 3D matrix that goes in the bottom of at the bottom of the wall behind the masonry veneer, and it's meant to catch the droppings of mortar and prevent them from clogging the weep system that should be at the base of the wall to allow moisture out and create this cavity behind the brick. What were you going to say, Mark?
We mentioned earlier about asking your local building official, but I like what Rob said. And I've heard you guys mention this over and over on the podcast throughout the last many podcasts. It's people forget to call the manufacturer. I mean, a lot of times they're not always a great resource, but a lot of times they're much more helpful than you would imagine. And when you're working with their product, I mean, there's nothing more important for, warranty or whatever, to make sure it's done exactly. They have instructions of how they want it done for a reason. I mean, that's the way these walls assemblies are tested, and that's where their products are tested. So.
And they have an interest in your success, right? They don't want you to fail. They want you to succeed.
Yep. And we know from experience that just talking to people, especially people who provide weather barriers and exterior details for weather stripping and air sealing and stuff those companies all have engineers on staff on their helpline, and those people are excited to solve problems.
I'll give you Tara Murray's email. So just put.
Yeah, for Benjamin Opdyke. Yeah.
She's gonna kill me. Well, Adam has an interesting problem. He's in Avoca, Indiana. Am I saying that right? You guys think?
Mm-hmm.
Avoca.
Yeah. Avoca.
I have a cabin that I just purchased, and it doesn't have any air conditioning, and for a good reason. It's an open concept cabin that is very large, about 3,000 square feet. It has cathedral ceilings and 2 separate lofts. One loft has a bedroom and a bathroom. The other loft is just open. I'm going to section off the open loft and make some rooms. I want to find my best option for HVAC. I believe a conventional system with ducts would be hard to accomplish because you couldn't hide any of the ductwork. Mini splits may be the best option, but I want to get your professional opinion. This cabin is going to be a short-term rental and has some really cool history. I've attached a picture. If you want to look it up on Realtor.com, you can, and they give me the address. And thanks, Adam in Avoca, Indiana. Did you guys see this place?
Oh my gosh! Did you see the
it's
pictures?
amazing.
It is not a cabin. It's like a lodge.
No, it's a lodge.
Amazing
It's
space.
huge.
It's kind of
beautiful.
stick style is how I would describe it, right? Like that Adirondack
Yeah, well,
aesthetic.
it has these beautiful. They look like they're sawn square logs with dovetail corner joints, which is just like the
fanciest
best,
of all
the best you can
logs,
get for
right?
a
Yeah.
log construction. Yeah.
But I'm looking at that ceiling. I'm assuming there's a hot roof above those planks.
Why would
the
you
ceiling.
assume that?
I guess you know what. It could be down.
I would assume there's not because of when this thing
Yeah.
was built, right?
Yeah. When did you say it was built?
It's historic.
Oh,
I don't know.
Let's
I
see.
don't know.
Does it say in the listing?
but yeah, it's amazing. And
So he wants to
Yeah.
put up some partition walls in these 2 lofts, right? And put some AC in there. What do you think?
I mean, certainly mini splits it's a very open, like it's not an enclosed cabin. It's really one giant room with lofts. And I mean, like you said, he might enclose some of them, but still for a nice open plan like this, and the fact that you have no wall cavities and no ceiling cavities, it seems like a mini splits would be the easiest things to sort of work in there. And they make some designer series ones now, but also they make the floor mounted units that you could build like an old traditional radiator cover that would possibly blend in nicely with the space.
how would you all right, so you're making, let's say, if it was just one room, it's not a big deal, but let's say you're going to make 2 or 3 rooms up in those loft areas. What would you do with the ceiling? I mean, would you run the walls all the way? Because you don't want to lose that gorgeous, wood framing timbers and the cool roof, but
Oh, you mean like how would you partition it?
yeah, how would you partition it?
Yeah, I don't see the whole partitioning thing happening. Like that seems like, I guess you would probably run stud walls up to those rafters, and just clad them in some weathered boards to match the weathered boards on the in the building. I mean, I can't imagine any other material you would want to use in there other than like rough sawn local lumber. But,
yeah, that's true. But yeah, and it all depends how you really design the walls and how they tie into the ceiling. But mini split is probably the way to go, I would think.
Yeah.
Looks like you want to say something, Jeff. Were you looking at that property?
Yeah. No, I hadn't looked at the picture before, so I just wanted to get a better understanding of what we're talking about. So,
What would you do? It's a hard situation to solve, I would say.
yeah, I almost wonder if that might be a case for exposed duct.
I'm thinking that.
Yeah. Old rusty
yes.
galvanized spiral duct running the length of the building, so it's aged look,
Dan Colbert has introduced me the phrase, don't confuse the record, right? And so if you're going to, add air conditioning to this historic building, maybe you just, let it show and be part of the aesthetic.
Yeah, because it's really already has that. Let it show. I mean, there's a reason that those timbers are exposed. I mean, that's the look you're going for. And so I think if you're going to do it anywhere, it would look actually pretty slick in here.
And, maybe you put the air handler in a closet so you don't have to look at that and listen to it. But I think you put the spiral duct up there and just own it.
Great idea.
It'd probably be the simplest route because you'd only have to have because basically this building is one long open exposed timber,
and you're just going to need to make a ton of cool air is my estimation, right? You're not going to condition this space and keep it cool. You're just going to have to blow cool air all the time to cool off people, not the space.
Yeah.
This comes from Derek. Derek, just joined the site. I'm designing my own passive-ish house and drinking from the fire hose on roof assemblies. The upstairs will have a cathedral ceiling, and I've come up with the following. Closed cell foam between the rafters, zip roof sheathing, foil-faced poly-iso, foil face up, 1x4 battens to create an airspace for radiant reflection, and attached metal roofing, similar to Matt Reisinger's house. Metal roofing. I haven't seen this in any of the articles yet, so I assume I've made a fatal error somewhere. Does this make sense? Also, are there any issues using zip roof sheathing on dormer walls? My house will be ICF, and the dormers will be the only vertical areas that will need sheathing. Figure I could use scraps from the roof to sheathe these walls. Thanks in advance, Derek. No, I think you can use zip for that, zip roof sheathing for that application, Derek, but I fixated on the wrong thing, as I often do, folks who listen to this show with any regularity. I immediately wanted to know why ICF house. And Derek wrote back, the house is in Tennessee, Zone 4. I chose ICFs for now because the house will be built into the side of a hill, so I'll need to create concrete foundation walls for the basement. There's only one story on top of that. The top level is cathedral with a build-out attic, so I figured why not continue with ICF? I like the thermal mass, R value of the assembly, and strength. The south face will have some large windows. They're shaded by a large porch, and I think concrete will make it easier to span those and not worry about deflection over time. ICF roofs are not common, so I've opted for I-joist rafters instead. The roof will be sloped at 912 to get the optimum angle for solar panels. Thoughts? Okay, so I want to just jump here and talk about my soapbox ICF situation here. ICFs are really freaking carbon and energy intensive, and I think unless you live in the Gulf Coast, there's little reason to use them in most places. And, you know, concrete has its own inherent problems with carbon, but it seems like ICFs are, especially for a whole house, just really unnecessary unless you're in a really crazy climate. And that's just my opinion. I'll, if you guys want to weigh in on that too, but I don't know, Derek, it seems like a wood frame house is so, you know, so much like bang for the buck compared to ICFs.
You know, the thing about ICFs is that I just feel like they make things more, they seem simple in their design, but in practice, they're a bit more complicated than people who haven't used them before, you know, are aware of. Just, you know, the way that you have to build them in multiple runs for brace, and you have to brace them properly when you're pouring, and you've got to get that just right.
Detailing windows seems problematic to me, like, you know, and siding seems problematic,
But also the idea of attaching surfaces to the inside and the outside. I know they have those little plastic embedded strips for screwing stuff too, but yeah,
how do you run pipes and you know, wires easily? I don't know. It's kind of weird to me. Anyway, so what about the roof? So the reason
I've never even heard of an ICF. When he said ICF roof, I had to read that like 3 times. I'm like, ICF roof? What?
Yeah.
So is it just like Spancrete panels type thing? What is that?
So the one way I've seen it done is with, I don't know if that's the brand name I saw, Spancrete, but it's like these, what look like concrete bridge sections, right? Except it's polystyrene and you pour concrete on top, and, you know, it's reinforced, and
so it's more like a
hard.
panelized. It's more like a panelized house, but the panels are made out of concrete and foam instead of.
But they're still you know, poured in place.
Really?
You know, it doesn't
poured
come
in place.
Yeah,
really. So you just got to brace the heck out.
Yeah,
of
you have false work under it like you would with a, you know, concrete light decks assembly, and yeah, it's a thing.
Yeah, and I totally agree with Rob. I've worked on one small project as a siding contractor, and it was a drag. It was just no fun at all.
How do you fix siding?
Yeah, well, plus there's just certain things where, oh, sure, they got the nailing strips, but sometimes you need, sometimes that's not enough, you know, that you need to, it's just, it was not fun at all. And I would just kind of paid attention how the interior finishing was coming on that project, and it was kind of horrible. I mean, it's not even, so when you compare prices, just like, oh, here's an exterior wall, after, you know, with with sheathing and with insulation, and then here's an ICF wall. That's even, you know, that is not apples to apples at all, because that's when your costs begin, is when the other subs show up. So yeah, I'm kind of not a huge fan.
I think I suspect why Derek is not seeing this assembly, and it's because it's expensive, right? As we were talking, there are economic constraints with home building, right? You need to make things cost effective. I would, exterior insulation is a great thing under metal roofing. Do you need closed cell foam between the rafters? If you got enough layer of exterior foam, you can use fibrous insulation, which is, way less carbon and way less expensive, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the thing is if you're starting from scratch and you can build the roof as thick as you need to build it, you plan for the right insulation levels on the outside and the inside, and make it the most affordable and easy to options that you can get. Just jumping back to the ICFs quick. I also just wonder how people in high termite areas feel about ICFs, because you mean
like Tennessee?
Yeah, I mean your entire, you would have to detail, at the edge of your siding, at the bottom edge of your siding really well, I would think, to avoid any, and also even where it goes below grade. I mean, you got to do the serious termite protection, I would imagine, in those situations. And that I like a concrete wall, but I think I like to put all the foam on the inside if I were going to have a concrete wall.
Especially in termite country, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's something.
Sorry,
something
Derek.
I haven't done a bunch of research yet, but it is termites. Minnesota termites is not a problem. Kentucky more so.
So I don't think you have Formosans in Kentucky, but they're probably on their way.
I don't even know what that is.
So they're like really aggressive.
It's a species,
it's a
right?
different species than like more traditional subterranean termites.
So Matt, I watched an episode. Matt Reisinger, he sprayed some like pretty thick. It wasn't as thick as paint, but it was a coating of some some insecticide along the bottom 2 feet of the interior of his framing assembly, and that's probably something like what I'm going to do.
Do you
Like
think
some
that
kind
stuff
of
is
borate?
toxic? I mean, like,
It
what
can't
is
be
that?
good for you.
What is that
Exactly.
stuff?
Well, if it's just got borates embedded in it, it's not going to be.
Borates, yeah. I mean, you don't want to be snorting borate, but it's
Speak for yourself, man.
For what I understanding, it's not terribly toxic.
So like in the Deep South, folks routinely have to have their homes sprayed to termites. It's just a fact of life, or they'll like eat your house and carry away your kids, and
I'm surprised I'm almost surprised ICFs are even allowed, because if you did a crawl space and you did interior foam insulation in an environment like that, you're required to leave an inspection gap at the top of the insulation so that you can see if the termites are getting into the framing above the foundation, right?
Yeah. I mean, maybe they have borate treated ICFs like they do EPS, right?
That's true. That's possible.
So, Rob, your concern with the termites is, I'm assuming you say this because termites apparently love foam insulation?
Or carpenter ants, anything that likes to burrow into stuff. I just don't like the idea of exposed foam bridging the interior and exterior of a home. I mean, that's just me, maybe. But
yeah. And I wonder if, it's different with the ICF. There's no bottom, but yeah, if you did a metal flashing, let's say you had foam on the exterior of your house, and if you did a metal flashing, broke something, with aluminum or something, and kind of sealed it to the house for the bottom couple inches.
Sure. I mean, you could certainly do, a waterproofing spray over the foam where it's below grade, and then do some sort of liquid or metal or cement board or something like that as your surface at grade. I mean, I know we've talked a bit about like protecting exposed foam at foundation. So there's it's not like there's no way to do it. It's just it just seems like a lot of extra details compared to.
Do you think Derek is still with us? He probably tuned out hours ago, right?
Sorry, Derek. At least 5 minutes ago.
So Derek, make sure you get enough exterior insulation. You want to be able to control condensation in the wintertime. And in Tennessee, that's not going to be a whole mess of insulation, I got to say. But you also have to meet the minimum R value. And, sometimes sloped roofs are different than flat ceilings. Or sloped ceilings are sometimes different than flat ceilings with regard to insulation levels. So you might want to ask your building inspector before you get too deep into what you're doing here. And don't worry about ICFs being the only way to, span large window openings. There's engineered wood products and steel and other ways to do that. And, I almost always see LVLs in those kind of instances nowadays because they're easy to integrate into conventional, platform framing.
And you know what? I if anybody else out there has actually built a full ICF house, I'd like to hear about it. There's a one built just up the street from me that I should go take a look at because, I'm not speaking from experience here. I'm just speaking from watching other people do this stuff. And, if somebody's got a good way to do it and it works for them and they're happy with the results, that's
I think in the right place, it makes a lot of sense,
Yeah. The ICF house that we worked on, they actually did pour. So I guess I have seen something similar. They did pour the floor in place with ICF foams, and the basement of that place, they had to form, they had to support this whole thing. So there was probably, it was just a very weird thing walking in the basement because there was probably, 100 2x4s just sticking up, propping up this floor. So it'd be like walking through a cane jungle or something. It was weird. And I'm just thinking, man, that had to have taken a long time to do that. And what are you gaining out of that? It's just,
I don't know. You're getting a concrete floor that you can't run mechanicals through, It's, I don't understand.
Yeah. So as a general contractor, we had to take, continuing education classes, and towards the end of my, it used to be just these really strict classes, but then they started allowing manufacturers to come in and give these courses and they're not supposed to support their product, but we did one 8-hour deal on the ICFs. And I thought, oh man, 8 hours of hearing somebody say how great they were. I thought they were the best thing ever until I worked in that house and oh man, they never told us about this in the class. They conveniently left out all these things that I have to deal with now.
Coincidentally, we've gotten a couple bad reviews of the podcast on iTunes, and one of them was a gentleman who built his own ICF house, and then the company that made his ICF forms went out of business, and he wanted some advice on how to deal with this sunlight degraded foam that was on the exterior of his house that was under construction for what looked like years, and this foam was very badly damaged, and he was mad that we didn't have an answer on how to solve his problem with his degrading ICF forms. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So there's that problem too. The companies go out of business, and if you don't get it done in time, the foam degrades, and you can't get anything to stick to it.
So we've officially had just one complaint about the podcast. That's not bad.
I think it's 3 or 4.
Okay, gotcha. That makes sense.
I'm sure there are lots more people who just don't review it, right? If you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. This comes from John. I'm writing with a question about self-builds. I want to build a small, about 1,000 square foot home on my property. I expect it to be a pretty good house, and I want to do as much of the work as I can. The foundation would be, I think, the most difficult portion of the build unless I were to build it like the foundation in the attached picture. I'm in the panhandle of Florida, and you see old houses like this everywhere, but the key word is old. New homes ought to be on slabs or built on stilts if they're close to the coast. Are these types of DIY-friendly foundations allowed by code any longer? And can they be more updated form with something like sonotubes? So we should describe this. And he's talking about masonry piers. In this case, he sent us a photo of what looks like a turn of the 20th century home up on brick piers. And in the Deep South, and even in Virginia and the Carolinas, I've seen lots of homes built this way.
Yep, either brick or concrete blocks.
And that's for the storm surges that come through with the tropical storm.
Well, actually, back then I think it was just as much for just cooling and drying the houses as it was for flooding.
And if you don't have freeze, right? Like it's a much easier way to build. You don't have like a bunch of foundation wall to build. You're just building these piers and intermediate piers for bearing points. And I don't know, it's a lot less masonry for sure.
Seems like a critter paradise.
I bet carpenters from those parts of the country will write in and tell us that that is indeed true. John says, as a former helicopter mechanic, I like the idea of being able to build with maintenance in mind, and being able to access the underside of my house seems like a no-brainer, and it would be a very appropriate use of Joe Steebrook's perfect wall. I've heard of using cement board to line the bottom of a house to keep critters out, which also seems like a smart idea with this type of house. What do you guys think? Oh, I'm in hurricane country, so maybe this type of foundation, along with the screw type of anchors you guys have spoken about before. Thanks for what you do. I've listened to every single episode and learned so much in the process. Well, thank you, John. So this seems like a really DIY-friendly foundation type. Wouldn't you guys agree? And I think if it's reinforced and attached to footings with some J-bolts or whatever, and the piers are attached to the building with metal connectors, that seems like a fine way to build.
Yeah, I think you just have to make sure you're meeting your local code requirements for fastening to the foundation. And he did mention the helical piers, and I know Michael Maines wrote about that. Both, I think, was it on Fine Homebuilding, or is it just on Green Building Advisor, about like a really easy way to build this way, where you either have the piers going right up to the structure, or you just have the piers coming out, the helical piers coming out of the ground, and having posts, maybe pressure treated posts sitting on top of that, and which is a super quick way to do it, because you hire a company to come in and drive those things into the ground, and they're done in a day.
Yeah, and you're guaranteed that it's going to be stable, because they don't stop going down until they know they get that certain amount of pressure. So if you got some mushy soil underneath these,
and it seems likely you would in the panhandle of Florida, right?
I would think so. So that's not a bad. But now with the piers, the helical piers, when they do it, if they were to do it like this, wouldn't there be some welding involved? I mean, because otherwise they would have to be. Is there a welding substructure?
You might have to do some diagonal bracing and some brackets. Yeah,
they have U-shaped saddles that bolt to the top of them. That would receive a beam of some sort that you could put a floor system on or tie to.
I mean, you would obviously have to insulate the whole floor structure of this, in between the cavities, the floor joists. Yeah, I don't know. It makes me nervous for some reason. I guess I can't think of exactly why.
Because you come from where basements are the norm, right? That's why.
It's true. It's absolutely true. I think of the other thing I think of, which is odd, but I just think of, how do you stop the weeds from growing up under there? And then what do you got to crawl under there on your belly
that's part of the aesthetic. That's part of the look.
This is like a house architectural form that's really common. This is I'm just certain it's not insurmountable things.
Yeah. I mean, especially if you live in a flood-prone area, it certainly makes a lot of sense, because your house is none of your house is sitting on the ground where it floods.
Yeah.
And I've seen on the Gulf Coast, Mississippi specifically, homes built with concrete masonry units, grouted and reinforced, with homes built on top to great heights, like 10, 12 feet off the ground in these flood-prone areas of the Gulf near, Biloxi and Gulfport and these other flood-prone areas that get hit by hurricanes pretty regularly.
Yeah, I mean, you might want to go and look into some contractors in the area that are already doing variations of this, because like you've got people doing concrete piers that are set into the ground.
And that seems like another great way to go,
concrete,
right? Once again,
it's easy.
Yeah. You've got
and with a spread footing, like you would have great uplift resistance compared to other things, right? If you put Bigfoots on the bottom of sonotubes and filled them all with concrete, that would be a pretty sturdy assembly, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
And down on the coast in North Carolina, where I used to go vacation a bit, they do basically the like telephone pole type piers. They're just pressure treated or some sort of treated wood columns.
That's what John was saying, that he does see those if they're coastal on pilings, wood pilings.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to do this, and it's certainly in a wet and a hot location is a pretty darn common way to build.
Using cement board, I think he's talking about like fiber cement. you need to put something on the underside of the floor system to keep the insulation in place and keep out critters. I think, fiber cement would be a fine choice. I think plywood would be okay. I mean, if it's going to get soaking wet all the time, I don't think I'd want plywood on there. And I think you should also put some kind of vapor retarder on the ground, right?
For sure.
To
some
stop
plastic
rising
down,
damp.
some gravel over that. Yep, just like you would in a crawl space.
It's a good idea.
One thing, houses have been built like this for many, many years, but I'll bet you the original ones just had exposed wood, flooring or subflooring right over the open bottom of the framing before people started thinking about air sealing and all the different materials and systems that we have nowadays. But we did an article not long ago about a house built where the whole bottom was sheathed with zip, and then the insulation was built up from there. I mean, in a warm climate, obviously you're not as much worried about insulation, but you certainly, if you're going to heat and cool, if you're going to have a modern HVAC system in there, you're going to want to do a decent job of air sealing it too. So
because otherwise you're creating a condensing surface like we talked about earlier, except this time it's the floor, right? That's now the cold spot if you have that poorly air sealed and insulated.
Yeah, so you could just basically treat it like another wall in this case, where you could run, whatever sheathing and WRB or air barrier product you're running up the walls, just run it right underneath the bottom, especially if you're leaving it high enough to. It's going to be a little bit of a pain getting underneath there and detailing that, because you'd be rolling around. Maybe get like a creeper. Roll around like you're working on a car.
Yeah.
Jeff, I'm going to give you the final word on this whole thing.
I think it's certainly a practical idea. I do wonder about, how to seal that up underneath, but because it definitely needs it.
We have a feature that we'll put on the podcast page. I think it was called Air Sealed on Piers, and it's this very assembly we're talking about, right, Rob?
Yep.
And I think Matt Milham worked on that feature, and it's a good one. But I think that builder's method was to actually have the floor system elevated, sheathe it, and then lower it down once it was all sheathed, so you don't have to do the creeper thing that Rob was talking about.
But part of their concern was they didn't have this kind of space that you have underneath. So
yeah,
they were lowering it down pretty low to the ground, whereas in these coastal southern situations, they're often big enough to crawl around underneath there.
It looks like a couple feet of clearance anyway,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, he's a helicopter mechanic. I mean, maybe a sky crane, Sikorsky sky crane, just drop the whole thing.
He's got to have some friends in the business, I'm sure. Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks to Jeff, Mark, and Rob for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive. Happy building. Thanks very much for listening.